Today I'm going to talk about how to change a tire on a car. Now I know lots of people have, understand it's a fairly simple process, but there are some details in there that are very important and can make it really hard for a person to do, especially if they haven't done it before, haven't practiced, whatever. And I know, of course, I know lots of people are going to have their AAA card and their towing company they call when they have a problem and so on. There's tons of times when that's going to take a really long time for them to come, or you're outside the range of cell service, and now you're stuck waiting for someone to come along and help you, right? So this is a pretty simple thing you can learn on your own and take care of a problem and be on the road again. Most cars come with a spare tire. They come with a jack, they come with a wrench, and everything that you need in order to change a tire. Now today, I don't have a flat tire, but I'm going to pretend that my tire on the car here is flat, and I'm going to go through using the equipment I have that comes with the car to do this. And I would really encourage you to take some time, when you have a car, when you own a car, or are using a certain car regularly. Take some time looking at YouTube, take some time looking at the owner's manual for the particulars that work with that car, right? Now, in general, this isn't a particularly dangerous thing, where things are going to fly at your face, but I'm being real careful today. I'm going to put my safety glasses on and while I do the operation. So let's go over here. I'm going to pretend that this tire is flat, right? Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about taking off the lug nuts. What's on here is a bunch of metal studs, but basically bolts, and nuts on the outside that hold that wheel tight against the hub. When you go to take those nuts off, you need to know what direction to turn the bolts, to turn the nuts, okay? In order to loosen the nuts, pretty much in almost every circumstance, is going to be turning the bolts counterclockwise to loosen. And of course, in my class, I'm always teaching my students Lefty Loosey, Righty Tighty. Well, that's helpful, although it's really helpful to know that Righty Tighty means going to the right at the top of the circle. So in order to tighten the bolt, you would turn it this direction, the same direction as the clock goes, going to the right at the top. In order to loosen the bolt, you go to the left at the top, or go this way, counterclockwise, to loosen the bolt. It's really helpful if you can be confident about that. Now the reason that's such a critical thing is these nuts and bolts are really tight. They're put on there tight, and over time they get kind of rusty and crusty, and you really, really have to be able to put a lot of force on them to make them come loose. So the other thing that's helpful is that once I get this thing jacked up in the air, it's often the case that this wheel is no longer stable. The wheel will try to turn. When I try to turn the nuts, the wheel's going to try to turn also, in a lot of cases. So one of the best things to do is for me to break these nuts loose before I even jack it up. Here's the jack. I'm not even using it yet. And it's okay to do this. The car is not going to fall just because you turn the bolts, say, a half a turn each, right? The wheel's not going to fall off. So now when I go to do this, I've got the car company doesn't give you a really fancy wrench. The car company gives you this small thing, right? And so this is a wrench right here that's going to fit those lug nuts. And I've got a little bit of leverage with this thing. If I put it on here now and start pushing, let's see now. I'm going to put it so I'm going to push down on this side, this counterclockwise, and I'm pushing. It's really hard to get it to move, really hard. I push here, push there. And what you often end up doing, what the average person ends up doing, is using their foot and pushing on it like that. Okay, that breaks it loose. Now that nut is just loose enough, and I do the same thing on all 5 of them. Some cars will be 4 bolts, some will be actually 6. Most of them are 5. Okay, so you can see here, I'm going to break this loose for each one. And last one. Okay. So each of these is broken loose enough. I think that once I get it jacked up in the air, it'll be okay to get those off. Now, this is called a scissors jack. In order to lift, and this is pretty common with cars, this thing has to be turned. As you turn it, it lifts up, right? And I can turn a little bit now. I have to know, based on the owner's manual of the car, where to put it under the car. You can't just put this anywhere and without messing up the car. If I pick the wrong spot, when this starts to lift up, it's pushing up with, several hundred pounds of force because you're lifting up like 1/4 of the weight of the car. So if this is a 2,000-pound car, like 500 pounds of force is going to be right here on this little thing. So I'm going to put it right under here. There's a little notch. It's just right according to the owner's manual. There's a little notch here. It's just right to raise up the car. Okay. And I'll get it just in the one I want here. Now luckily, good thing is I've actually taken my jack out before and put some oil and grease on that, so it'll actually turn really nicely. And then with this particular model, again, we're turning it clockwise to tighten up, clockwise to raise the jack. I've got this little thing here. This little guy loops into here, and then this part latches on slides on like that, and I crank the whole thing a whole bunch of times to get the car to raise up in the air. Crank and crank and crank, and hopefully you can see that it's lifting the car. You got to do it a whole bunch of times. I can guarantee you, if you're out on the freeway, out on the beltway or the interstate, and you're trying to do this for the first time, you're going to have some colorful words to say, especially if it's raining, cold, miserable. But a little bit of practice, it's not too hard. Get this guy all the way up. And of course, I need to raise it up until the tire comes all the way off the ground. Right? Just keep on cranking. It's hard to tell. I continue turning this to the right. It's raised up the car. And it's just enough. There we go. Now there's space underneath there. Okay, so underneath this tire, there's a little space here. I can take this off. Now, you can figure out how much you actually need to turn the wrench now. It's not too bad since I broke them loose already. Of course, I have the parking brake on, so this one isn't moving. But a lot of times on a car, when you go to turn these, this wheel will actually try to turn. And that's, if you haven't broken them loose ahead of time, that's not going to be very helpful. So I'm going to spin these off by hand. If the threads are a little crummy and you have to use the wrench to do this, sure, use the wrench. And unscrew all the bolts. All the nuts. These, proper terminology, these are lug nuts. These little bolt-looking things sticking out are called studs. Okay? Wheel studs. And that's what holds the wheel and tire onto the car. Take it off. And of course, this would be the time to get out our spare tire if we really had a flat tire. But luckily for us today, this tire is just fine, so I'll put it back on. It's a little bit of a job to get it on there. When you roll it over here, it tends to be kind of heavy, a little awkward, and you've got to roll it over here and lift it up and line up these wheel holes with the studs to get it to slide on, right? A lot of times it works well. Get down here. Oh, there we go. I made that look easy, didn't I? Okay. Now, you need to put these these nuts back on. I'm going to cheat just a little bit because I happen to have a helpful device here. I'm going to go ahead and start the threads out. You can see I'm turning each of these clockwise now to get them started. Make sure you've got the nuts and the studs threaded together neatly and smoothly. If the threads are crooked and you start putting a lot of force on it, you're going to tear the threads all up, and that'll be bad. All right? Okay. Now I just happen to have in my trusty stash. If you actually want to buy yourself some helpful tools, This is a thing that's really helpful. It's a lug wrench, they call it, and it's called a 4-way lug wrench. Got all different size wrench openings on it. If we find the right one to fit onto these, which, you know, it often requires me to switch around a couple times. Now I can save a little time by spinning the wrench like this. Now, here's the next thing. When I go to tighten these bolts, I'm going to tighten in a star pattern. I'm not going to go around the circle like this tightening. I'm going to start by tightening this one up. I'm going to go across the wheel to the next one, and across the wheel, and across the wheel, in a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to get it tightened up. And that's going to do a good job of pulling this neatly onto that hub. All right, so I've got this nut snug. I'm going to go across here and start tightening up this one. And I'll go to this one, right? Spin that. And of course, you know, if we were a car garage, we might have some power equipment to do all this stuff. That would be very handy. Okay. And under ideal circumstances, I would have a torque wrench, a thing to put on a super strong amount of twisting force on it. Okay. I'm going to go through and make sure all five of them are tight. And now if this wheel spins, when I go to make this tight, if this wheel spins, what I can do is just get each one snug like this, and then I can let this down so it starts touching the ground to do my final tightening. Once this starts to touch the ground, it's easy to tighten these up without having the thing spin. So, of course, we use clockwise to raise it up. Now we're going to use counterclockwise to lower it, right? Now once I've got it so it's touching the ground, and now this is on the ground almost. There's still a bit of the weight of the car on the jack right now, but while it's just touching the ground, I'm going to go around and make sure my studs, lug nuts are tight. Of course, I have to make sure I have the right one here. Oh, there we go. Put a little extra to remember, we're going clockwise, right? And if this was, sometimes it makes that squeaking sound, sometimes not. You can do the same thing with this guy, right? Put it on here, tighten it snug like this by hand, maybe put a little extra force on it with your foot. Don't kill it now, don't break the thing off. Just make sure it's snug. You know, and this is gonna. Oh, another thing that can help you a lot is to make sure that you check your spare tire occasionally. You know how you check the air in your regular tires from time to time, especially like when doing oil change, you know, usual maintenance on the car. It's a good time to also check the spare tire, because it's really common to come out here and try to change a tire and have a spare that's flat. Of course, another really not that expensive thing that can help you, besides getting yourself this 4-way lug wrench, you can get yourself a little compressor. They call them an inflator. It plugs into the lighter socket. It'll come out here. It's like makes this funny noise, and it will pump air into a tire. If you had a slow leak, like just had a nail sticking in here, and you could just pump the tire up and drive to the gas station. But if you've got a really flat tire and you need to change it, it's not very helpful if your spare is flat. So we kind of do like this, get all the way down. There we go. And now we've changed the tire. Look at that. That's real helpful. Okay, so that's that. And of course, you know, if in real life I do have a wheel cover. I want to put this back on. Lots of wheels now don't have these on them. And we're going to look at one of those in just a minute here, because there's one other thing you should know about this particular wheel cover. Wow. Okay. Okay, let's go over to this other vehicle for a minute. I'm going to get a special thing out of the back. And we're also going to look at this wheel right here. Okay, let's look real close at the lug nuts on this wheel. Can you see these okay? Can you see the, what you should see here is that these regular lug nuts have a hexagonal shape, just like the lug nuts over there, and you could put a regular lug wrench to turn that nut. This one right here is called a lock. It's a lug nut. It's still got threads and everything inside of it, but you can see the outside of this is perfectly round, and a wrench is going to do nothing to turn that. The whole idea is this wheel and tire combination are expensive. This fancy kind of wheel is a thing that somebody might want to steal. They probably won't steal those plain old rims and cheap tires that are on the Honda, but on this fancier car and this fancier wheel, this is worth taking. So this thing here is called a locking lug nut or something like that. And if you look real close here, there's a funny pattern to the shape inside the top of that round lug nut. Okay? And the matching pattern is inside this guy. I'll bring this up a little closer. Can you see the inside of that? Okay, so there's a special pattern down inside there, and that's like a little standing ridge in that funny shape, and the funny shape of that ridge matches the funny shape of the groove in the nut, in the lock. So this is called, creatively, it's called the key. Right? This is a wheel, the locking lug nut key. When I put this onto here, I can rotate it around, and all of a sudden that little groove fits in, the little ridge fits neatly into that groove, and now look at that, I have a big lug nut pattern on the end of the key. So I would put my lug wrench on that along with these others and be able to take this off. And so this makes it, that system makes it a lot harder for someone to steal the wheel, but when it comes time to actually change something, like change a tire or put new tires or rotate the tires or whatever, it's really important to be able to put your hands on this key. So if you have fancy wheels and you've got a locking lug like that, make sure you know where this key is, okay? And hopefully, like my vehicle, it lives right back here in the back with the jack and the lug wrench and all that other stuff that goes with this vehicle. All right, so don't forget, be sure you check your owner's manual before you need to use it. Be sure that you check your spare tire for air, right? And ultimately be very certain you can confidently say, I know what clockwise is and counterclockwise. Clockwise tightens the bolt or the nut, counterclockwise loosens it. And with those things, loosening the nut before you raise the car up, tightening the nuts after you put it back down on the ground a little bit, all those together, it is not hard for an average person to change a tire on the car.